You are listening to The Strange Accounts. I am your host, Matthew Carmona. If you've had an experience and want to come on the show, you can email me at thestrangeacttspodcast@gmail.com. Now, on today's show, we have Ryan Edwards. Ryan is a cryptozoologist. He has written a book, and he has a YouTube channel called The Cryptid Chronicles. Ryan has done a lot of research and has a lot of knowledge on the multiple topics of cryptids that are out there. I had a great conversation with Ryan. We talked about multiple different things, including his goals, kind of how he wants to try to educate the public with this knowledge and research that he's done on the cryptids that are out there in the world. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please sit back, get comfortable, and let's get to Ryan. All right, we're going to welcome Ryan Edwards to the show. Ryan, thanks for coming on.
Of course, it's a pleasure being here.
So, you're a cryptozoologist, and you're from Texas, correct?
Of course, yeah.
So what got you into the cryptozoologist?
Well, I like to say, like any little boy, I was always into like dinosaurs, animals, things like that. But also I had a love for mysteries. And soon enough, thanks to all those passions, I fell into the world of cryptozoology. Back when I was a kid, I remember one TV show that really got me into this study was Monster Quest. Monster Quest, things like Lost Tapes on Animal Planet. I watched those shows and it made me realize, there's real life mysteries and monsters out there. All we gotta do is discover them. So I fell into the world of cryptozoology.
Okay, cool. Now, have you had any encounter with like Bigfoot, Dogman, anything like that?
Regrettably, no. I'm one of those people that I will always admit I have not had personal dealings with these creatures or like eyewitness accounts or anything like that. But just because I haven't had an eyewitness account doesn't mean I don't believe it. Like, there's been enough evidence without me seeing a cryptid or creature to prove that's real, even without seeing it. You seeing it, it's just kind of like, okay, for sure, 100% it's real.
Got you. Now, you have a podcast yourself, correct?
Yes.
And so if you want to just go ahead and give a shout out to the audience where they can find you.
Of course. My podcast is called The Cryptid Chronicles. It's on YouTube. Just look up The Cryptid Chronicles online on YouTube and you'll find it. It's a small channel. We have about maybe 90 to 100 subscribers. We only have about 8 or 9 episodes out. I'm working on my 10th coming up soon. We're really new. Only started a couple months ago. So if you want to go out there and support it, that'd be greatly appreciated. I do it to get information out, share researcher ideas, get researchers on that might not be heard often. And for me, it's all about the sharing information and just kind of entertainment as well.
So what kind of guests have you had on so far?
I've had a couple on. I've had two or three friends of mine. I've had Nate Brislin. He's a Bigfoot researcher up in Maine. I've had Ryan Paul Tremblay. He's from out in Arizona. He's had a Pukwudgie encounter, Dogman encounter. He does a bunch of cryptid stuff. I've had a friend of mine named Tex Weston on. He does Texas Front Porch. And last week, actually yesterday, I had a woman named Anita Collier. She did the first annual Bigfoot conference in Alabama last year. And I had her on talking about the conference and talking about next year's conference.
Okay. So out of all the stories, encounters that you heard so far, which one of those moved you the most?
I think out of all of them I've heard, I think Tex's story, because Tex Weston, he's a cryptid researcher and paranormal researcher up in Fort Worth and Dallas, up in that area. And when he was 16, he had a Dogman encounter. And it totally, utterly changed him and got him into this whole world of the paranormal and the unknown. And now he has his own channel, Texas Front Porch, on YouTube. And he does a lot of research with him, a man named Jason McLean, which is an author from up in Fort Worth and Dallas area. He has, I think it's, Metroplex Monsters. He does research into Goat Man, Bigfoot, living pterosaurs. But how he talked about his encounter, you can see even after all these years, he still has emotion in his eyes. You can see like how he flashes back to that moment because, especially at a young age, seeing such a peculiar animal as a dog man, especially seeing Bigfoot or something like that, it's kind of not exactly expected, but it's fairly normalized within cryptozoology. But then if you encounter something so paranormal and extreme as like a dog man or even like a duende or flying humanoid, it's so extreme. And I can see that in his face every time he talks about his encounter. It really moves me.
Yeah, that sounds like a very fascinating account that he had. I think I stumbled upon his podcast because I think you're on the same Facebook group, correct? That you saw my post where I was looking for witnesses to come on and talk about their encounters.
Yeah.
So out of all the research that you've done so far, do you specialize in just one cryptid, or do you just kind of just all encompass on all of them?
With me, I try to talk about like not every cryptid out there because that's almost impossible. But I try to talk about as much as I can, like from Bigfoot to Thunderbirds to even international cryptids like Mokele Mbembe, Nessie, the Mangali Sayoka, the Emulina Toka. There's all these cryptids I try to study, but most of my studies do go into the more what you call the ancient hominid or rather hominoid field, like Sasquatch, Yeti, skunk ape to an extent, the Gugui of Africa, the Yowie of Australia. These are the cryptids I'm really interested in due to the fact that I have a history in paleoanthropology. And a lot of these cryptids connect to human origins and also other human-like species. So that's really one group of cryptids I always study myself.
What do you think, or what is your opinion of Dogman?
Pretty much with Dogman, it's back when I was younger, when I first got into this field, I always had to kind of purview that like everything's physical. All these creatures have to be living, breathing animals that live in our environment. But bipedal canines, what I call them, bipedal canines, differ from that. Anatomically, physiologically, even ecologically, they can't be a physical creature. First off, like there's no such thing as like a bipedal digitigrade, like how their legs are. It just wouldn't be physiologically possible. Second off, what I like to call the ecological impossibility of dogmen, because these are apex predators. They would have to be. But you see them living in areas where there's other apex predators, such as maybe even Bigfoot, bears, wolves, big cats. So with niches in ecology, you can have 5 or 6 major predators in one area. So with me, with Dogman, I kind of go into more paranormal aspects to it. Like with me, I have it in a box of cryptozoology I like to call paracryptozoology. These creatures are not of ecological or physical origins. Creatures like Dogman, flying humanoids, Goatman, because just evolutionarily they can't have evolved from something else because it's just almost impossible.
So you're saying that Dogman is more paranormal from a lot of the encounters and stories that are out there about Dogman.
Yes, and even like look at the encounters with Dogman. Almost all of them are violent or not passive in nature. And large predators, even bears, are very passive animals because they know once they go after people, well, more people come, pretty much. They want to get out of the area. They want to just be avoided. But with these dogman creatures, you see them jumping on vehicles, scaring people away, having almost like a sense of what people like to call almost like a demonic energy around them, just because like almost a pure evil. And it shows me, well, natural creatures don't act like this. So what does that demonstrate? Does it demonstrate that they are not natural, or are they some type of evolutionary origin that we have no idea of? And it's in my opinion, I believe they are just supernatural in origin. But I also just bring up that there are physical attributes that people have of these creatures, like footprint finds, them eating roadkill, them drinking water. So it's kind of a weird slippery slope of like, okay, is this most likely this is a non-physical creature, but they do physical behaviors. But it's just kind of a weird mixture. But me, I believe like 90% of dogman encounters are something non-physical in origin.
So do you think they're more of like interdimensional, like they're crossing on a different plane, coming from another plane, coming onto our plane of existence?
That's always a possibility because like with me, I haven't done a lot of research into the more like paranormal or supernatural side of these creatures because I more see this in a more ecological, zoological aspect. But you never know; it could be extraterrestrial, ultra dimensional, spiritual beings, or what have you. They could be pretty much anything else other than physical creatures. What that is, that's just not really where my research goes into because it's just so unquantifiable. With me, cryptozoology should be about quantifiable data and not just speculating on everything. Of course, speculation is natural in this field. No one has a Bigfoot body or dogman body, so we have to speculate on these. But they have to be educated speculations, hypotheses, not just throwing ideas out there. But with dogman, you really have to just throw ideas out there because there's no idea, there's no basis on a bipedal creature looking like a canine, or even like a mixture of human and canine characteristics. So you kind of just have to throw out these ideas on. It's like throwing a noodle at a wall and seeing if it sticks, pretty much. So it's like with me, that's just not what I try to do in this field because then almost like you're wasting time making more questions than answers.
Okay. So what about Bigfoot? Like the Patty film we have out there, which I think is like the best video that we have of Sasquatch out there so far. I mean, there's so many out there. They call them the blob squatch and the blurry videos that they have out there. No one really has done anything better than what we see from the Patty film. So what is your take on that?
On like Patty film or on like the Sasquatch in general?
Both. So you just pick which one you want.
Gotcha. With the Patty film, there's too many details in it to see that it's a hoax. It has to be some type of physiological creature in that film. Of course, everyone mentions the muscle contractions, the hair movement, the even amount of hair along the body, which shows, okay, this is not a person in a suit. If you look at the suits made back in the 1960s, none of them are even close to what we see in that film. And second of all, there are certain anatomical details that we wouldn't even know of until later on. Like, if you look at the sagittal crest on the Patty film, it's literally a head shape that you couldn't put a person's head into. It's just the brow ridge is too low that a human's very rounded skull would, of course, be protruding out, and we don't see that. The large gluteal muscles, which is very important to bipedal locomotion. Actually, if you look at the feet of Patty when she moves, there is a mid-tarsal break. You see the foot almost break in half. And of course, we wouldn't know about that until about the 1990s, early 2000s, when Dr. Meldrum started doing research on the mid-tarsal break. So there's references in a film from the 1960s we wouldn't know until the 1990s or even today. So for me, I believe the Patty film has to be some type of creature. What that creature is, that's the next question. Is Bigfoot a human of some sort? Is it some type of hominid, like some type of ape? Me personally, I kind of go with multiple different candidates for Sasquatch. One of them, of course, is a classic Gigantopithecus. But with me, I've gone away from the Giganto theory recently because there's too many differences between Gigantopithecus and Sasquatch. But Giganto was what you would know as a eurotrophic. It lives only in one environment: jungles, forested areas. With Sasquatch, you see them living in multiple environments. You have sightings from the desert to the southwest, to the mountains, to the Rocky Mountains, to the Appalachians, to the swamps of the southeast, and even old boreal forests. And second of all is even the diet of Giganto. Of course, we now know it was mostly a bamboo eater. The jaw demonstrates a what you call a dual phagous creature, something that can break very hard foodstuffs like panda bears and things like that. With Sasquatch, we show a more omnivorous diet. There's sightings of them eating plants like berries and nuts and fruits and things like that, and also animals. There's sightings of them hunting deer, killing and eating marmots and other meat stuff. So the behavior of Giganto is very different from Bigfoot, what we now know. And me personally, too, if you look at the jawline of Gigantopithecus, a lot of people say, well, that demonstrates a bipedal stance, but not necessarily. I believe Giganto was a knuckle walker. It was more like a giant gorilla than a walking giant, like what Dr. Grover Kranz's replication was. Of a giant 9-foot tall creature. It was more likely just a giant gorilla-like creature, or even a giant orangutan-like creature, because genetics have shown that Giganto is more related to the Pongonoid part of the simian family tree. So it's more related to orangutans than it was gorilla or even chimpanzees or humans. So I believe it's a quadruped and not a biped, like how we have a Sasquatch. For me, the most likely candidates for Sasquatch are either some type of Paranthropus or Australopithecine, a human ancestor, or an older genera of primate like Dryopithecus or Oreopithecus.
Okay, I see where you're coming from with that. Now, on Bigfoot, Sasquatch, what is your take on the woo factor that you see, where they talk about lights, people talk about seeing UFOs, they talk about you see the tracks, and then boom, they're gone.
Like, for instance, when people talk about them just disappearing, like almost like a snap of the fingers, well, I say, well, of course they are, because these creatures are masters of their environment. They know how to avoid you and leave your line of sight very easily. Like, one time a friend of mine demonstrated, like, he was in a ghillie suit, and he could be standing right in front of you and disappear within a couple of seconds. And it's like almost as if they just disappeared. And now the phenomenon of, like, orbs and things like that. Of course, you have the whole idea of, like, swamp gas and things like that. But it could be just these are natural occurrences occurring around these creatures. Now, we have to look at the data and, like, okay, how many accounts does Sasquatch have orbs or other phenomena occurring around it? Most likely, I think that percentage is not high, but it's simply that these eyewitnesses that talk about seeing peculiar phenomena occurring around Bigfoot, these are the sightings that get the most attention. But statistically, they're very low. Like, for instance, now a lot of people realize that everyone believes, okay, everyone that sees Sasquatch describes a smell or something like that. Well, statistically, looking at most eyewitness accounts, that's only about 9% to 8% of encounters. So, like, with this more woo factor, like orbs, things like that, the factor is that these are very low in percentage-wise in eyewitness accounts. And now you have to also account, okay, are people talking about maybe what they already have found in the paranormal before they got into Sasquatch? Because perception creates one's own reality. Like, if someone believes in Bigfoot, they might misidentify maybe a weird-looking bear for a Sasquatch. That's just how the human mind works. Of course, our eyes aren't video cameras, and our brains aren't exactly computers. So what we perceive and what we receive can be two different things. So with the woo factor with Sasquatch, I think it might be there, but it's very, very low percentage-wise. So it's kind of a outlier within the research.
So, like for the footprints, like I've seen video and I've seen photos of where it's just in the middle of the nowhere, walking in snow. There's no trees. There's nowhere to hide. The footprints stop. What's your kind of take on that?
Yes, we do have things like that. I remember, I think a couple of years back up in Washington that occurred. It's That's a very strange phenomenon because you do show that there is nowhere for them to extend. And of course, a trackway has a beginning and an end, and hopefully the end is where the creature is right now. But you don't see that. So with that, those are like the times with me personally, I'm like, okay, maybe it could be something else occurring here because no animals trackways are just stopped like that. And like if it's in the middle of nowhere, it's very hard for someone to hoax that. And even then, if this was a hoax, you would see the tracks around that trackway of like them taking off the footprints and walking away. But if it's just a crisp, clear trackway that just stops, it demonstrates there could be another phenomenon occurring alongside these creatures. But is that phenomenon a cause to the Bigfoot sightings? We don't know. Like, I like to talk about this. Like, let's just say alien abduction is a real occurrence and people get abducted. What if they just abduct Sasquatch as well? It doesn't necessarily mean these creatures are originating from extraterrestrial origins. Well, what if they're getting researched as much as like cattle mutilations and humans? Like we don't know because it's all these are factors that are unknowns. And with me, I try not to answer a mystery with another mystery. Like, okay, Bigfoot and UFOs, they're both unknown. So a lot of people's minds are like, okay, they must connect. Not necessarily. We cannot. It's hard to connect two outside phenomena just because they're alike. Because then you're answering one. It's like answering a question with another question, and then you just get more question marks than answers.
Okay, interesting take. Interesting take. I gotcha. Have you done any research so far, like out in the field, or is it just kind of studying, not in the field?
With me, haven't done a lot of field work. Like I've talked to one eyewitness, two eyewitnesses here in San Antonio that have had eyewitness accounts. I've done a little bit of field work out in East Texas when I went to the Jefferson Conference. Like I went into the woods a little, but not like to the extreme of like a full-on field expedition. Because with me, I've never really had the time to like go out and do field work because like, it's a lot of work out there. It's not just a camping trip. So with me, I do admit that I'm more of a armchair researcher. Like one quote I always bring up is, if you've ever seen like Jurassic Park 3, Alan Grant says there's boys that want to be astronauts and there's boys that want to be like astronomers. The, the, the astronomer is safe and researches from afar. But then a cryptozoologist, the astronaut, goes into the field and actually does the research. I want to try to pursue that, but it's just that with time and, of course, budgetary matters and things like that, it's harder to do that. So, like with me, at this point, it's a lot of talking to eyewitnesses, looking at historical reports, and just trying to research the known fossil record and known creatures to try to correlate to cryptids. Like, okay, with me, one big important factor with cryptozoology and cryptids is like, what are their origins? Like, nothing just appears like that. They have to evolve or adapt from somewhere. So what is that somewhere? Now, that's where a lot of my research lies.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Now, you told that you had a couple of witnesses there that were in San Antonio. Are you able to elaborate on their encounters?
Yeah, I'll elaborate a little bit on it. One is a friend of mine, and she said she heard peculiar howls one night in a creek bed here in San Antonio. I might not right now because I'm still doing investigating. I won't say which particular creek, but she said she heard peculiar howls, and so I did a little test. Like, okay, I played wolf howls, coyote howls, wild dog howls, and then I played a Bigfoot howl and a dogman howl. When I played a dogman howl, her eyes lit up and she said, "That sounds exactly like what I heard." That tells me, okay, doesn't necessarily say it's a dogman, of course, but it shows, okay, there's something else. Because when I played a coyote howl, no reaction. The children knew what that was. So it's kind of demonstrating there might be something more peculiar going on there. Another eyewitness said he saw a large black bird flying over in the Medina Lake area here in San Antonio. And of course, in the past, we've had also Thunderbird sightings here in San Antonio in the past. So that eyewitness correlates to what we already know as known sightings. And second eyewitness I got connected to because I worked with one of their loved ones, and they supposedly saw a Black Panther here in San Antonio back in like the 80s. So now people realize a lot of cryptid sightings do occur closer to towns. Like if you look at like San Antonio alone, we've had Sasquatch sightings down here. We've had Thunderbird sightings. We've had well-known Thunderbird sightings researched by actually one cryptozoologist that's here from Texas, Ken Gerhardt. He's done a lot of investigating around here in San Antonio. And look at even the DFW area. There's a plethora of cryptids seen up there. You have like Goatman sightings. You've had Dogman sightings close to there. The Trinity River has a bunch of Sasquatch sightings. So people don't realize is how not cryptid infested, but there's a lot of cryptid sightings here in Texas.
Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't even know that I even had some that close to my doorstep. And, you know, I live in the DFW area. So crazy. I didn't even know that they had Goatman sightings here near Fort Worth.
Yeah, because even, of course, you have the infamous Fort Lake Worth monster sighted back in the 60s. White creature, people first described it as almost like a goatman-like creature, but then later on, people described it more ape-like animal. So people believe, if you look at Lake Worth, there's an island inside of it called Greer Island. And back in the 60s, there was I believe, a alcoholic area where they had like alcoholics and all that they were trying to help. And there were sightings of a weird white creature in that area. They soon known as Lake Worth Monster. People call it the Lake Worth Goat Man, the Lake Worth Ape Man, because the sightings describe different types of characteristics. Some described as almost fish-like in one account, but most likely it was just possibly a Sasquatch, and there are all sightings of Sasquatch having white to silver fur. So that's most likely something that occurred. And also, I'm trying to remember. I know it's in the DFW area. I think near Denton, there's also a bridge that supposedly is a home of like a goatman-like creature. And even along the Trinity River, there's actually been living pterosaur sightings. A friend of mine, Jason McLean, that wrote that Metroplex Monsters, he supposedly saw a pterosaur along the Trinity River. And that's what got him into the world of cryptozoology.
Is that like a Nessie kind of creature? The lake. Was that what he was referencing to when he saw in the lake?
Not a aquatic creature, but a living pterosaur, almost like a pteranodon or a pterodactyl, like from Jurassic Park. And then, of course, the Lake Worth Monster is just a Bigfoot-like creature, but it's called the Lake Worth Monster because that's where the sightings were.
We've got some thunderbirds. I don't know too much about what a thunderbird is, and I'm pretty sure there might be some audience members that are listening that are in the same boat as me. So explain what a thunderbird is. I mean, I've heard of it. I just don't know really what it is. I was thinking more of more like a pterodactyl kind of thing, or is it more like some of the like buzzards that we have? Because we got some really big
buzzards. Yeah. Because that's good with thunderbirds, it's kind of two phenomena occur. You have the giant birds that people see, of course you have up in Lawndale, Illinois, you had a Marlin Logan picked up by a giant black bird back in the 1970s. And most likely, if these creatures are real, there's something called a pterotornis. Pterotorns were giant prehistoric birds that lived here in North America during the Pleistocene. They went extinct about 10 to 12,000 years ago, but they were so large, their wingspans would be about 20 feet. So a lot of people suspect these creatures might have survived in the modern day and are now known as thunderbirds. And these sightings occur back in Texas. We had a large flapper sightings back in the 1980s. There's sightings up in Pennsylvania, in parts of California, parts of the Midwest. Areas where there's high warm air currents. So most likely, if these creatures are real, they might use warm air currents to just glide for hundreds of miles, almost like modern-day condors. And then you have a second phenomenon with a thunderbird occurring. You have the more living pterodactyl, living pterosaur phenomenon. People describe scaly dinosaur-like birds flying around, like truly prehistoric-looking creatures. With that phenomena, I put a little bit of leeway into it, but I'm not a big believer within living pterosaurs and living dinosaurs in the first hand, because when people describe like a prehistoric-looking bird, almost like from Jurassic Park, that's not what we now know pterosaurs look like. Pterosaurs look totally different from what people are describing. And like even here in Texas, we had the big bird phenomenon back in this, I believe it was the 70s. Then down there, down the Rio Grande Valley, especially around Brownsville, people describe a large, about 30 to 40-foot wingspan bird with scaly skin, leathery-like wings, and a long head with a long neck and no tail. Very similar to what we now know as Quetzalcoatlus, the largest pterosaur to ever existed. So with thunderbirds, you have the giant birds, like the pterosaurs, and the more realistic origin of thunderbirds. And then you have the flying pterosaur-like creatures that are more almost like dragon-like in origin, like scaly, reptilian, and all that.
Okay, wow, that's fascinating. I didn't even know that we even had those. Even that we even had sightings here in Texas. Wow,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. Well, thank you for the explanation of what a thunderbird is. I appreciate it.
Cool. And like people don't realize just how many sightings of that we have here in Texas. Like people don't realize how cryptid related Texas is.
Yeah, everybody's thinking about like all the stuff is up north. It's going to be out west. No one's thinking Texas. Texas ain't got no goat man. Texas ain't got no thunderbirds. What is that? As prehistoric, like condor, or some people going into Jurassic Park and seeing. And then when you start looking into what prehistoric dinosaurs look like, it's not what we've all seen in the books of what we've seen even in museums. They're more bird-like creatures that have feathers and light bones structure. So what you see in Hollywood is nowhere near what's actually out there that happened in history.
Yeah. And it's something what you would call a cultural anachronism. Cultural anachronism is when culture changes, so the perception of a creature changes. Like, look at dinosaurs back in the 1800s. The first replicas made in Britain were pretty much giant iguanas. And now look at the modern perceptions of them being more bird-like, being more avian characteristic. That's why we literally call them the non-avian dinosaurs. Technically, dinosaurs are still around, but they're what now known as birds. And like that's one thing I talked about with like the African dinosaurs being seen, like Wakanda Bembe and Milanatoka. People are describing dinosaurs like what we thought about they looked like back in the 1800s, not what we now know they truly look like. People describe what you call tail dragging, like when they describe like Brontosaurus. If you look at the like old 1960s replicas, they have the tail dragging along the ground. We now know they had the tail above the ground and walked with a very horizontal back, with the tail being horizontal to the back and the neck. People don't describe that when they describe these cryptids being seen around the world. So that causes me to think, okay, then people aren't saying dinosaurs. It could be just a misidentification or just a overall hoax. Because with these dinosaur sightings people have, they're not describing what we now know dinosaurs truly look like. And why would these creatures not change for 65 million years as well? Like from 65 million years, what we knew as like Velociraptor and T-Rex is now what we now know as sparrows and eagles. So why would other dinosaurs not have evolved and changed for 65 million years? It just honestly doesn't make sense to me. So with the living dinosaur phenomenon, I'm just not a big, real believer in it. There's not enough evidence for it.
Okay, I'm following you on that. So when you said that you think that possibly that people were hoaxing dinosaurs, I feel like that would be like a really hard work to try to hoax a dinosaur.
Yeah. But even with that, there's a cryptid like quote unquote cryptid seen back in the 1900s. It was I forget the family's name, but it was a couple. They went on a honeymoon back in, I think it was Guinea in Africa. And they came back with a fantastical story of a tribe that lived in the jungle and that they hunted dinosaurs. There was a creature called a roe, they called it. And they said this creature had a spike at the end of its tail, four what they call dagger marks from like a stegosaurus, had a long neck, a frill on its head, and a sharp beak. So it's describing different characteristics of different dinosaurs. But when this family came back, people were kind of amazed, like, oh wow, prehistoric creatures might still exist out in the jungle. But then it soon got revealed that this couple was lying and that this indigenous tribe they found never even existed. So there's kind of a hoax right there. And even with the belief in prehistoric creatures, it's very romanticized. Like think of like Journey to the Center of the Earth or The Lost World. And even people don't realize when Lewis and Clark got sent for the expedition by President Jefferson, Jefferson told them to look out for mastodons and giant ground sloths, simply due to the fact that they thought giant megafaunal creatures still live out west in North America because they found giant ground sloths beforehand. So when they got sent out, they were expecting to see giant Pleistocene megafauna, but of course they didn't. So it's kind of funny when you think of that romanticization and kind of uneducational part of cryptozoology. People believe of like ancient prehistoric creatures still living out there. It gets romanticized for a bit.
Okay, yeah, like I can understand that. Like they thought, going out west was this unknown, untamed land. There's going to be creatures of unknown origin still out there, so it's not been civilized out there. Civilized, my bad. Out there, so to them, hey man, you're gonna run into some monsters, some dinosaurs, and then when they got out there, they're like, it's not out here. Yeah, I got you. Okay, so let me take this like this. So, what is your goal of your channel for the audience?
Well, pretty much my goal for like my channel and my research, it's not to necessarily prove these creatures exist, simply due to the fact that within modern scientific explanations, proving a species exists is via a body or physical remains. And like with Sasquatch, you have that whole idea of like, okay, we need to get a body. So that means killing one. I'm not very much a believer in that. It's very antediluvian, very Victorian ideas of like, we need a body to prove the creature. So I'm not necessarily here to prove these creatures exist, but it's here to like help educate and spread the word about these creatures. Because cryptozoology kind of helps with an overall view of like, we don't know everything out there. There are still mysteries and unknowns in this world. And cryptozoology just helps demonstrate that. So with these creatures, and also helps with ideas of conservation. When you think of the amount of already endangered species we have in this world, and then we think of like cryptids, most likely if these creatures are real, they're also highly endangered themselves. Like one thing I always bring up to people is like if and when Sasquatch is discovered, what would the next step be? Would we make reserves and parks for Sasquatch? Would we start doing more conservation? So it's all about that more educational part, spreading the word, because a lot of people, when they hear, well, I hunt Bigfoot, they think of you as a loon that goes out in the woods with a shotgun and hunt for monsters. I'm trying to change that view of cryptozoology, because ology is in the name. It's a science. It's about collecting data, finding quantifiable evidence, and anecdotal, and not just anecdotal. It's about finding the truth out there, and not the more monster hunting, fantastical side of cryptozoology. So, me, it's just more about the science and getting that word out there, and hopefully getting more people into it, especially people that really have those, not necessarily higher degrees or anything like that, but a little bit more, know more about like animals and ecology, because that's the information we really need on these creatures. So overall, it's just about educating the public and getting news of these creatures out there and showing that there is a more educated side of cryptozoology. It's not just a bunch of people in the woods monster hunting. It's true science. And hopefully that's what I try to get across to people.
So that's kind of like your goal, is to go and kind of educate people kind of in that route.
Yes.
Now, when you talk about like monster hunters and people looking at that as a more fantastic excitement, like, I'm hunting for monsters. So what is your take on kind of when people are doing that?
Well, I don't ever want to put people like that down, but a good someone, I believe it was a well-known researcher, Cliff Barackman, put it like this, and how he puts it's perfect, exactly what I say myself. Look at wrestling. There's hundreds and thousands of years of Greco-Roman wrestling, and then you have WWE. You have professional wrestling, then you have real wrestling. The professional wrestling is the ones that really get the spotlight. Those are the people that are out there hunting for monsters, and like the TV shows, like, no offense to people like on the show and that, like Mountain Monsters or Monsters in Alaska, that are the more fantastical entertainment side of it. Not saying their research is any less valid, of course, but of course this is the stuff that really gets the people interested in this, and then they want to go, okay, these people are hunting for monsters, what's behind that? And then that's like the real wrestling, the real cryptozoology behind it. People that are out there really doing the field work, doing the scientific part of this, doing the lab work and all that. So with me, the fantastical side of cryptozoology is perfect, because that's what really gets people interested in it. It really gets it's like the hook that catches them, but then you have what's behind there. You have the science, the years and decades of research that people put into these creatures. And that's like the next step. Of course, you get the entertainment part, and then you get into the real world of cryptozoology.
Yeah, I gotcha. I enjoy watching Monster Hunters. I enjoy watching, I think the new one that they have coming, that they've had out, I've had that for a few seasons. I think that was Expedition Bigfoot. And I like, it has the entertainment aspect too, but it also has the skeptic, and it has them out of all the shows that I've watched so far. I feel like that one, they use so much, they have the skeptic, and then they have the people that actually go out there and sit and hunt, and they use all the technology to try to find them. But they're the only ones so far that I've seen where it actually shows some stuff. Because I know you watch some of the other shows out there, and it's just like they kind of leave you on a cliffhanger. They teach you all about it, show you about, hey, this is what we had. They go in all the towns, getting all these witnesses, and then they try to go out there. They spend a couple of nights, and they're like, nope, nothing here. We're out. So, what's going to go with that is that I look at it as entertainment as well, but it's very educational for me. Like, that's what kind of got me into looking into more Bigfoot stuff, was like, and Sasquatch, is listening to a lot of podcasts too. I listen to the Sasquatch Chronicles. I listen to the Confessionals, because they have a lot of variety of guests that come on. But I really enjoy listening to those podcasts, because they have some very very fascinating, and like their accounts. I believe majority of those people have had experiences and have experienced Dogman, Bigfoot. There's some other cryptids out there. You got the rake now that you're starting to hear, which is like this like gray Gould looking creature that people are running into. They don't know what it is. They've seen it on the, and so for me, the fascination part, it still needs to be there for people, because I think that's what gets people still wanting to get educated, because like, it is this mystical, creatures out there that, and for a lot of people, until they see it, they believe it. Until they don't, you have a lot of people that are like, nah, I don't believe in it. But for me personally, like, I truly believe that these creatures do exist, that they're out there, because you have too many sightings and too many people seeing a creature out there. So I think this has been a great conversation so far. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, one thing is like I know you got into cryptozoology via like those TV shows, but like, have you ever done any type of like field investigating or gone to any conferences or anything like that yourself? Or?
For me personally, no, I have not. Unfortunately, at this time, I have not been able to attend a lot of the conferences that are out there. I really do. Don't get me wrong. Like a lot of the conferences I do want to go see. I do want to go and check those out and speak to a lot of the like guests because you do have like, I think Jeff Dunham goes out there and he does a lot of talks and stuff. So I'd like to speak with him because he's on the scientific side, kind of like you. He's got the biggest collection of Sasquatch. Jeff Meldrum. What did I say?
I think you said Jeff Dunham. I was like, wait, what?
Jeff Dunham. Not my bad. I think it's not Jeff Dunham.
You're good.
Yeah, it's Jeff Meldrum. Yes, like I said, he's the one that, man, like that I've seen that I take his information to heart because I'm like, yeah, he's the only one that's kind of like out there that's gone kind of publicly about, Sasquatch and looking at it more towards a scientific side with all the DNA, all the, all the footprints that he contains at his own, place that he has. Yeah. Lab that he has. So, because I know that when you watch some of these shows, that's where a lot of people go. They go for a person that is an expert, a master of his craft, and that's where everybody goes to. They're like, hey, he's the person that you need to go to if you find DNA, if you find footprints. He's the person to send to check to see, hey, is this really a Sasquatch footprint or is this a hoax?
Yeah, like I met Dr. Meldrum last year at the Jefferson Bigfoot Research Conference, and if I could only see how many times I saw people go up to his booth and say, hey, I have this photo. Is this a Bigfoot print? Hey, I have this. Is this a Bigfoot print? Because people want to know because he's the expert. He's really the expert in Bigfoot prints, and he can really identify it like with a snap of a finger almost. You're like, oh, that's a bear. Oh, that's human. Oh no, okay, that's something interesting. Just because he's been doing so much work in this, and he has that scientific background.
And he's very publicized too. Yeah, he's out there. Like when you see all of these programs and these new Bigfoot shows come out, they always talking about him. They're always saying, hey, he's the guy that everybody goes to.
Yes. And like even like with me, but down here in San Antonio, we also have a fairly well-known cryptozoologist, King Gerhardt. And he's one guy I've always been able to talk to and like, hey, what about this sighting? Hey, what about this? What about this? Because there's a lot of experts in this field, and it's great talking to those people that have been in this field for 20, 30 years because you can just tell the expertise and like all the information they have. And I just love the sharing of information. But like when you go and meet these people, because there's stuff that they'll bring up and you didn't even have an idea about beforehand.
Right, and that's kind of like the reason that I started my podcast is that I want to give people a platform where they could come on, they could feel non-judged, they could give out their story, talk to put it out there, talk about what happened to them, and kind of give them a place to just vent about their encounters or their experiences that they witnessed. Because I understand that. For myself personally, I've had some paranormal experiences, so I understand with family and friends and just people out there that they look at you funny. They're like, they don't want to believe you. So that's why I created this, to give that platform for the people to come on and talk about their experiences, and then also because to also help with education, because they may listen to a show and find out that someone else had the same experience with them, or like, for example, I had a guest come on that talked about seeing a white face, kind of like a demon. And he asked me, has anyone, he's like, have any of the people so far that you've talked to, have they ever had this, like, almost like a female face, but it's white. It's got the red eyes. And he's like, I don't know what that is. So he's like, if you have any people come on and they've had a similar encounter like that, can you please let me know? So I said, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to give people that platform that they can come on and they can get, hopefully, maybe some answers to some of their questions to know that they're not alone out there.
Yes. And that's the thing too, is like, it's almost like the second you say, oh, well, I hunt for Bigfoot, it's like people automatically want to take down 20 IQ points.
Oh yeah. People look at you like, this guy's crazy. Hey man, when's the last time you took your meds? You know, so I get that. And like bringing up Bigfoot, man, I understand. Like I know a lot of people that are like, if you bring that up, they just give you a weird look. And now, like, if you were conversating with them, they're already out. They're already out the door. Yeah. So yeah, I understand that.
Because there's a huge stigma around this field, and rather if you look at it from a personal side to a professional side, people when they hear, well, you look for monsters, they think of you differently. And like especially like with me, when you look at people and talk about that, they're like, wait, you seem normal before this conversation. I'm like, well, I am normal. Like, all this is a science. Of course, it's a science that what we're looking for is unknown, but still a science. Like, with me, when they bring up, well, Bigfoot, have you ever seen a Bigfoot? Well, no. Have you ever seen gravity? So, like, I've seen it acting, but I'm like, yeah, but you haven't seen gravity itself. Like, it's not a color. It's not like a particle or anything like that. But you know it's there, right? You see it acting upon you. With Sasquatch, you have the phenomena of, like, you've had sightings, you have vocalization, you have video, you have photos, you have footprint casts. So there's a phenomena to it. You might not see the Sasquatch, but you know there's a phenomena occurring there. So I kind of bring up things like that. And all science is about discovering the unknown, finding what have we not found yet, and let's go find that. And cryptozoology really helps enforce that into people. And like with me especially, that's why I love talking to kids about things like this, because they might be interested in like Sasquatch or Bigfoot, but they don't know what field do I go into. Like back when I was a kid, I was like, okay, I want to go hunt for Bigfoot, but what career path do I follow? Do I become this? Do I become this? Do I become this? People don't know there's certain career paths you can't follow to do this. And when you find that, it's really awesome, especially like when I talk to kids, because I do a lot of school presentations myself about like my book and the research. And when I talk to them, like, wait, like all this stuff, like there's stuff behind this. I'm like, yeah, like of course fairies and dragons don't exist, but there's still mysteries out there. Monsters, I always tell people this: monsters aren't real, but unknown creatures are. These creatures aren't monsters; they're just unknown. They might be monstrous in appearance or behavior, but they aren't there to eat you and hurt you, because the second you talk about monsters and not cryptids, you'll get that fantastical monster hunting, I want to go kill a giant type thing in this field. And I try to stay away from that. And like when you talk to people about that, sometimes like, okay, that does make sense. Because when they hear Bigfoot, they think, oh, okay, crazy people that go out in the woods. But then once you have like the actual educated conversation on it, people are like, okay, you have a good point. And like, I'm not here to change someone's mind. If you don't believe in Bigfoot, okay, cool. Like, no skin off my nose. Like, with me, it's not even about belief anymore. It's about knowing. That's what science is all about. Yes, it's about, okay, it's possible Bigfoot exists, but what's the plausibility? Like, I always talk about, it's not about possibility, but it's about plausibility. And it's about knowing, not believing. So when people talk about, like, well, you're crazy, you believe in Bigfoot, like, okay, say I'm crazy and believe in Bigfoot, but I can find the evidence for it, because it's not about belief. It's about data. It's about collecting the evidence.
Right. And I agree with you on that. You know, when you look at like kids, I think they haven't been tainted, I guess, in a way with the views as an adult, because as a kid, you're way more open to this. You're way more, you know, you start, like what you said, you start thinking about, this is a career path I could go into, or is this a possible something that I could I could actually start studying in and know, just like the math, you like, this is real. Because just with like that alone, I think that's what scares a lot of people with cryptids and they, talking about Bigfoot, UFOs, whatever, is everybody, they kind of have this bubble, this safety. And when you start saying that this stuff is real, you've popped that bubble.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know how to act or react to that. So it's better for them to just deny it, not talk about it. I didn't see that in the woods. I didn't hear that. That was a wolf. Or, that was something else. That wasn't a woman. That was probably some lady screaming in the woods, some like crazy person.
Yeah.
That was not Bigfoot. Oh wait, you know what? That was a mountain lion. So, yeah. But hey, Ryan, man, before we go, you said that you had a book. Where can people find this book?
Of course. My book, it's called Cryptozoologist of the World. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Half Price Books. If you just look up Cryptozoologist of the World, my name, Ryan Edwards, pretty sure you'll find it. Or one also place you can find is if you look up the cryptidchronicles.net. That's my website. You can find my podcast and my book there, a link to my book. It's pretty much an introduction into cryptozoology. It's a modern-day bestiary of different cryptids around the world. I talk about from Bigfoot to the Hebagon to Mokalemabembe to the Mengai Sayoka to the Isnashi, all these unknown species seen around the world. And it's just like a little introduction. It's not really in-depth because I kind of made it for like, okay, you want to get into cryptozoology? Get this book. And if you guys are interested in it, yeah, you can find it on Half Price Books, Barnes & Noble. Anywhere where books are sold, you'll be able to find it.
Awesome. Hey, Ryan, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. So thank you for coming on, man.
Of course. It was great being on and meeting you and talking to you because this is really what this is all about. It's just about conversation. Like, it's awesome talking to like-minded people, but it's also great talking to people that are open-minded on things like this.
All right, folks, that's about wraps up this week's episode. Again, if you've had an experience and you want to come on the show, you can email me at thestrangeaccctspodcast@gmail.com. I hope you guys were entertained and educated with the conversation that I had with Ryan. It was an awesome interview that I had with him. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too. He also, don't forget about his podcast, is to help you can go out there and support him by subscribing and liking his channel. Man, that's going to just help him out. I will be posting the new episodes on my channel, the Strange Accounts Podcast. If you could also like and subscribe, leave a comment on what you thought of this week's episode, that's just going to help the podcast grow and help me out with what you guys thought of the show. And if you want to give me some ideas on what kind of other topics that you want me to go over, man, I'd appreciate that too. And if you're also listening to the podcast on the other platforms that are out there, such as Spotify and Apple, please like and leave a 5-star review. It would just help. It was just going to help me out, and it's going to help reach new listeners. So please like and share this podcast with your friends and your family. Again, thank you for listening, and you have a good night.